Commissioner Brewer, for your observations, which are especially timely today. There is a lot of focus on the economy. The Bureau of Labor Statistics just released new data today on unemployment, which is holding steady at 3.6%, but we know that we still see disparities when it comes to Black men. And so this is a key focal point today. And I think your focus on the need for job training programs is a nice segue to our next panelist, Dr. Robert Simmons, because we need job training programs that focus on every sector of our economy, particularly in the sciences and technology sectors. And Dr. Simmons is someone who began his career as a middle school STEM teacher in Detroit Public Schools and has extensive experience in this area. So looking forward to hearing his insights. Dr. Simmons, as you're aware, social scientists have pointed out a growing concern for educational systems in providing access to science careers for Black men, especially in our urban areas. And we also know that access to STEM programs is critical to identifying our nation's future scientists and to providing a pathway for young Black men to pursue their dreams. So, we are again focusing on prevention strategies today. I would love to hear your thoughts and observations on ways that our educational system can be reformed to promote wider access to STEM programs for young Black boys and young Black men. And would love to also hear your thoughts on national programs that might be a model for creating more balance and equity in the educational system for Black men and Black boys.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Want to thank Representative Wilson for her work on this issue and others. Want to give her a special shout out for her 5,000 role model work, which is something that she and her team and I have talked about in the past when I worked with Sean Dove at the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. So also want to honor the ancestors and the shoulders of those that came before us to take on this work. In terms of workforce development, when I think about STEM, there are models that are out there that are doing well and have done well for quite some time. I don't want to necessarily go too far in the weeds on data and statistics, but I will say that for Black men, the problem isn't that Black men don't do STEM. The problem is that Black kids don't see them, right? And so I think there's a narrative that's out there that has to be adjusted, that is using an asset framing as opposed to a deficit framing of the ways in which Black men show up, not just in STEM, but in society, right? And so I think as someone who's a trained social scientist and was a tenured professor at Loyola University, Maryland, and a trained researcher, it's important to keep in mind that when we think about STEM, that the narrative of how we talk about how we show up in these spaces is important, right? And I think similarly, we can also talk about a narrative around Black fathers and using data to guide our thought process. And based on everything we know, Black fathers are actually the most involved group with their children of any other racial group in America, right? It's a statistical fact based on research from the Urban Institute and other places. The point of the matter is that we can apply the same type of conversation and dialogue to STEM, is that there are models, right? And I want to get to solutions. One of the things that we must do from both a policy and a practice standpoint is really support out of school time programs that are going to support the progress that is being made in so many amazing schools. And shout out to my brother, Dr. Hutchins, for his work in Alexandria and throughout his careers, that there is progress being made in many schools, but we also have to understand that we need to support research-based out of school time programs. We need to have conversations with the federal government about increasing funding to support out of school time programs that will partner with school districts is one piece. The other thing that's important as we think about STEM in the workforce, we also need to make sure that in the world of teacher training that we are diversifying the percentage of Black men who are going into classrooms, but we also need to make sure that we upskill elementary school teachers' ability to teach STEM and teacher preparation programs. They spend a lot of time on literacy, and rightfully so, right? However, we also need to upskill and make sure that we're training the next generation of elementary school teachers to be scholars and leaders around STEM pedagogies that are both culturally relevant as well as sustainable in our schools. The third piece I want to highlight is the Meyerhoff STEM Scholars Program at UMBC under the leadership of Freeman Herbowski. Like, we need to replicate that across the country, right? And think about what does it look like to do those types of things. And I think there is a path forward. And then when we think about Black male teachers, it's important to keep in mind that there's a national conversation around recruiting more Black male teachers. It's actually not a new conversation, right? It is generations old, right? But the thing about it is that when we recruit Black male teachers, it's important for those in education, when we think about the Department of Ed and others, that we need to hold folks accountable, not for simply recruiting Black male teachers, but about where you place them early in their career, right? So in other words, if you place a Black male teacher in X school district in a school where they're going to be by themselves, the data tells us that they're much more likely to go out the back door and leave not just education, but the profession, because they are coming into a very isolated situation. So part of it is really saying to folks, how do we incentivize cluster placing and creating cohorts of Black male teachers who enter the profession in our school districts, as opposed to kind of sprinkling them all over the place. The other piece I want to highlight what Congresswoman Wilson mentioned around universal pre-K. Pre-K should be free and a human right in the United States of America if we're serious about elevating our progress in STEM. Part of the challenge is that in the workforce, people will say to companies like Micron, well, we need to increase the diversity of engineers at Micron. And that is true. And Micron is working on that and has been committed to that. The point that I also want to make is that you have to go further upstream, right? We can't start STEM education in 9th and 10th grade. You have to start it in pre-K. So we have to invest resources to ensure that pre-K is free in our public school system for young folks that we believe and we know have the ability, the brilliance, and the genius to excel in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I want to highlight 3 particular things that are happening, right? The Hidden Genius Project focuses on Black boys in STEM out of Oakland, California. I want to highlight them because they do amazing work. We need to make sure that as a community, we are highlighting these amazing programs and projects that are happening. And I want to put that accountability on philanthropy to also come to the table and highlight some of the organizations that we're funding. The Benjamin Banneker Association is another example. They're launching for the first time a mathematics program to basically elevate the skills and knowledge of young Black boys in mathematics, right? And so that is important. And then there was the Changing Expectations Coding Makerspace that took place in Texas. This was last year, 2 years ago, that is super important to remember. Lastly, it's important for us to work with colleges and universities to ensure that we are getting more Black men into these STEM programs. From 2001 to about 2016, the percentage of Black folks in general, regardless of gender, has not increased. From 2001 to about 2016, NSF tells us that it's about 9%. The solution shouldn't come from the universities, but we have to go further upstream and work in close concert with those who are experts in K-12 education. Lastly, we need to support the National Math and Science Initiative led by Dr. Bernard Harris, who was the first African-American to conduct a spacewalk. They work deeply with HBCUs to increase the number of Black STEM educators. Organizations like the Center for Black Educator Development with Sharif El-Mekki are critically important. So from an out-of-school time perspective, we need to make sure that we're investing in those particular programs. And the last thing I want to say is that we need to make sure we're supporting experts in the field, right? And I say this, that like there are people in our community who are experts in understanding what works when it comes to Black men and boys in education, in STEM, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need to make sure that we're having them, ensuring that they have a seat at the table, because we have some of the most brilliant minds in the world who can help us solve these problems. And I always say to folks, just because you're passionate about Black men and boys doesn't mean you're an expert on Black men and boys. It just means you're passionate. And Dr. Hutchins will tell you, you can be passionate about kids, but that doesn't mean you should teach children, right? There are other ways in which you can support young people. And so I just want to encourage folks to really look into some of these out of school time programs. Most of them are nonprofits. We need to make sure that we're investing our resources in those particular spaces. So thank you for holding space for this particular conversation, and really want to make sure that folks understand that Black men and boys aren't a problem. We need to stop problematizing Black men and boys, but understand that they are critical scholars and intellectuals in the world. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And I want to especially thank you for calling out the model programs that you think are working and that are worth replicating across communities in our country. Hidden Genius, the Benjamin Banneker program, Changing Expectations. So thank you for your work.